Hi guys, Andy and Spoken Label back in the house on a very sunny Sunday afternoon, well in England. Now, we're over to America today, and this is something obviously perfect for Halloween, this one, because why not bring in what we've got here today, which is a lady from Sisters Paranormal, and we've got the wonderful Kristy with us today. Now, Kristy, tell us obviously first of all then a little bit about yourself. So I know what led you to this direction you're heading in, obviously. But tell people who don't know you, obviously,
Sure,
what
absolutely.
started you and your sisters off, and now it's just you and your sister, I do know.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for having me today. I really appreciate it. My name is Dr. Kris Sumner, and I'm the founder of Sisters Paranormal. And we are an all-female paranormal investigation team that travels around the U.S. to haunted and historic locations, really telling the historical narrative of those locations, and then coupling that with any unexplained evidence or paranormal evidence that we find at those locations. So it really started for us in 2013. My sisters and I, we've always had a fascination with the paranormal and belief in the afterlife. And so we routinely took girls' trips to different locations because we all live in different parts of the country. And in 2013, we had the opportunity to go to Moundsville, West Virginia, which is home to the West Virginia State Penitentiary, one of the most reportedly haunted locations in the country. We had a family friend that sat on the board of that facility. And he said, why don't you take one of your nights while you're here in town and stay in the penitentiary and see if you can connect with our resident spirits. And so we did that. We just did, we took some voice recorders and a couple of digital cameras, one night vision camera at that point, and had a blast, caught some unexplainable things such as footsteps and men speaking and such. And so after that, we really decided that we wanted to formalize, this into a more professional group as best that we could. And so we formed Soul Sisters Paranormal. And like I said, we just go around the country now to different places.
Yeah, I've seen if people go onto your website, and we're going to be talking a lot about this. I've been looking at your website. You're great. You've got like a load of basically full investigation videos, and certainly I've seen your first one, the West Virginia State Penitentiary video. Mm-hmm. It's absolutely chilling. That was it. Made me shiver. That big style. Did you find out with that when your first investigation back then? Did you think to yourself, "Oh wow, what we stepped into here in that night"? Did you then?
We did, because there's a couple things on that video that, we heard in the moment, but a majority of kind of what we do and we catch is really on static cameras or on equipment that we don't hear in the actual moment. So when we went back and listened to our voice recorders that we captured some of the, what we call disembodied voices, that was really chilling. And so for us, it really became more about the research aspect of it and really trying to find a more in-depth explanation as to why these spirits will communicate with us. So, I mean, there are moments where you have trepidation, of course, but for us, it really is more about the fascination level, more so than a creep or scare factor, if you will.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. It's, I was telling you off camera before, and I'm not going to go into my details, but I do believe in that sort of entities, like you said already, and it's a fascination behind it, like various ways you could look at it, obviously. But like I said, obviously what you've done is over the years yourself, like you said, obviously was you and a number of other people, which now just down to you and one of your sisters now. How have you found it over time? How has your investigation work actually changed now? Because you've been doing it for like 9 years now, haven't you? And the videos date back for the last 6 years, really. So.
Yeah, and to your point, it has changed a little bit. COVID really had an interesting impact on that as well. But when we first started, we were a group of 5 females. So it's myself, my twin sister, our younger sister, and then 2 female family friends. And what was interesting about our group is that 1, we're all female, and 2, we all have advanced degrees. So not that that's any better or anything that of other groups in the community, but it really adds a sense of research perspective that other groups might not really want to tackle. And so that was really unique for what we did. And so it was, 5 of us, we would go to these different locations. And then life happens, right? Michelle got a new job. Cara moved across the country. Kim had a grandbaby. And so that really kind of changed the dynamics as well. And then obviously COVID. So it really just became easier for Jenny and myself. She's my twin sister. For Jenny and myself to really conduct the investigations primarily. And the others will join us when they can. But for now, the face of Soul Sisters Paranormal is really just my twin sister and I. And so that's how that perspective has changed. The overall investigation style obviously would morph because now we're down, instead of having 5 people, we've got 2 people. So it's just Jenny and I, doing the research, going to the investigations, conducting the investigations, doing the review of all the audio and video footage that we capture, seeing if we find anything. And then I will put together the historical video and couple that with the paranormal that we find in the location.
Brilliant. Now, where did the name Soul Sisters Paranormal come from, then?
Honestly, I was on the lawnmower one afternoon and I just started thinking of different names because before we went on about 3 investigations and we really didn't have a name. It was just, hey, let's go here, let's go here, let's go here. And I was just mowing along on the lawnmower and I just, boom, Soul Sisters Paranormal. And so I thought about it like 4 or 5 passes on the lawnmower and I'm like, okay, that's going to be our name. And so then also, I wanted a really dynamic logo as well. And so we came up with a sugar skull. But if you look at our skull logo, there's different aspects inside that skull logo that represent certain things. So I wanted a feminine look. So we have the angel wings and then, the keyholes in the eye that represent exploration. We've got the heart, which represents love. We've got the cross, which represents our religious faith. So a lot of symbolism inside the logo as well.
Yeah, if people look at it, so I'm looking at the image here, it's like, and I'm colorblind, so my eyesight's problematic at the best of times, but even I can see various things on that. And that must have took quite some time to get that logo right, really, John, because I can see the level of detail on that straight away.
Mm-hmm. Well, I knew that, like I said, I knew that there were certain aspects that I wanted to include. So I actually went to a tattoo artist and I said, this is what I want. This is what I want the look to look like. Can you do that? And he said, sure. So we sat down together and he drew it out and had the designer put it together. So that's kind of how we went with that.
I was wondering if there's some sort of tattoo. It does look a bit like that. No, that's really, really interesting. Now, what I did find interesting almost obviously when I was researching you, I know you and your sister have both got a criminal justice PhD, haven't you, in public affairs? And I think that gives you, I'd hate using this word in it because it does apply to me as well, my degree, the qualifications I've got, bits and pieces. It gives you like a sort of an authenticity, I think, in your work you're doing. That makes people think yourself like the way you're not just jumping into it cack-handed. You've been, obviously, your brain's been trained almost to think about things in a certain way and look at it.
And you're absolutely right. Again, not to disparage any other team or to, say that we're better than anybody else in the paranormal community, but it does lend that research factor, if you will, because we did spend years in university doing different research programs and such. And so that's how we really conduct our investigations. Every investigation that we go into with a very healthy skepticism of the location. And so the very first thing that we do when we approach a location is we take a day tour and we look at everything in that location that could cause somebody to think that it's a haunted location. We look at environmental factors. We look at street lights, airplane traffic overhead, train traffic nearby, streetcars that would go by that would make a noise that somebody might think is, a whistle or a wind or something. So we look at all of those things first, and we take very copious notes on the location itself, and then we'll conduct our investigation. And so then when we couple that with the fact that we've controlled for every environmental factor that we can control for, what we're left with is what we call the unexplainable. So for example, if I'm in a location and I hear a man's voice talking on the voice recorder, I automatically know that's not us, obviously, because we're all female. And plus we have complete control of the environment. And so that again lends us to say, this is unexplainable in this moment when what we've done leads us to this. I can't explain that. Now, if somebody wants to come back and say, okay, well, I think it's this, this, and this, then obviously I want to have that dialogue because I don't want to put out anything out there that, could have a real solid real world explanation. But for right now, what we've done is, like I said, we've captured things that I can't explain. And that's how we put it out there.
Yeah, I've been reading up on all the questions you've been putting up. Like, I love the fact where you put common questions on your website, and I'd go through one or two with you because I went like you've obviously been taught you quite often you have done a few prisons I can see already, and I found the one that I found most interesting. So I do like these places. You've been to St. Augusta Lighthouse because that was usually I think what I've seen in the videos and stuff and these sort of things. You can usually get equipment set up in a reasonably small location, can't you? To get it set out. This one in a lighthouse, that's a tricky one straight away because. Tell us about that then, because that's obviously something that's very different to what I suspect you normally would do.
Right. The St. Augustine Lighthouse, we've been there a couple of times, and just the city of St. Augustine itself is fascinating. We're talking about, one of the oldest cities in the country, founded in 1565. The lighthouse itself was actually built in 1879. So a lot of interesting historical narratives just from the lighthouse itself. And so to your point, the lighthouse obviously goes up. And so it goes up stories. And so that's very different than buildings where you're walking around on a couple of levels. And so the lighthouse did present a challenge in that respect that you're climbing, 200 plus stairs to get to the top. It had different landings. So every, half rotation of the staircase, there's a landing. And so I think there's 9 landings total. And so we put night vision video cameras on each of those landings, and we really had to control for noise pollution, because once you're in this tall cylindrical tube, anything downstairs always, echo to the top. And so really we only sent a couple of us in at a time to really control for that noise pollution. I think there was only one time when all 5 of us went into the lighthouse itself. So you've got the lighthouse, there's a keeper's cottage that was right beside the lighthouse as well that we investigated. And we found some very interesting things. There was one time when we were up on one of the landings, and I thought that we had heard somebody whistle. And so I actually whistled a couple of tunes just to kind of mimic that. And from down below, a man's voice yelled out, "Saw you," which was kind of interesting. Again, can't explain for that because once we went into the lighthouse, we shut the door behind us. So we knew that nobody else could come in. And then what we also do is we'll set up essentially what they're called as trap cameras. So they're used in wildlife hunting or wild game hunting. They set them up at night. So we'll put these trap cameras around so we see the entire perimeter. So we know if anybody approaches the location while we're inside. And so that was one thing that we knew. Nobody approached the lighthouse when we heard that voice, and we were all upstairs on one of the landings. So it couldn't have been one of us. And the lighthouse was absolutely fascinating. Just St. Augustine itself is just a great location to investigate.
Yeah, get the history of it. You look at always, don't you, when you go into new investigations. I think I know I've read this before, where the history is often the crunch point, really, isn't it? It's like I'm sure you'd agree with this. Like every time you do these investigation, if you're going to find something, there's usually because there's something happened in the past, hasn't there? Where it's trauma, there's a story there, isn't there? So. Yeah, I get you completely. Now, the one that caught my eye was obviously, like I said before, when I was reading up on it, was when you went down to Fort Mifflin as well.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, like I said, that's again like was that quite spread out your investigation where you had set everything up for that one, really?
It really was. And just to backtrack just a second, the historical perspective, as you were speaking, that really is the crux of what we do. And, we get to have this very tactile experience with these locations that not a lot of people might not get to have. I mean, there's probably not a lot of people in the UK that have the chance to spend the night in the St. Augustine Lighthouse or spend the night in Fort Mifflin. So what we want to do is give our audience that experience with us. And so that's why the history is so important, because, without the history, there wouldn't be the quote unquote paranormal. And so to be able to tell people, this is why this building is so important. This is why this location is so historic and, just important to the overall makeup of the area. That's really what we want to portray to our audience. And so Fort Mifflin was one of those locations. This is a fort that was built during the Revolutionary War. We had George Washington there at the moment And he said, I need you guys to hold off the British while we get our army out of Philadelphia. So a very small band of revolutionaries were able to hold off the entire armada there. And so there was a lot of history just in the revolutionary aspect, but then it was also used as a prison during the Civil War. It was used to hold armaments during the Korean conflict and the Vietnam War. So it really has this longevity with regard to the historical perspective of it. But excuse me, it's also, to your point, very spread out. So there's numerous buildings. There are what we call casemates, which are subterranean rooms where they held munitions to keep them cool. And so for that challenge, it really was finding the location where we're going to put our cameras, and where we put our stationary cameras and voice recorders, and then to really use what we call trigger items. And trigger items are things that we either construct or bring with us in order to elicit a response from an entity. So for example, at Fort Mifflin, there was one of those casemates that was used as a solitary confinement cell. And so we asked ourselves, what would somebody in solitary confinement want? They probably want water. They probably want food. And just because it was, during that time, we put in some cigarettes. And so we use those to say, okay, this is spirit. This is for you. If you want to communicate with us, we would love for you to do that. But we're leaving these things in acknowledgement of you and your past. And so in Fort Mifflin, it was really interesting because we left those items in that solitary confinement cell, and then we set up a stationary laser grid in this little room. And there's only one door, only one way in or out. And so during the night, we captured a shadow figure walking through that laser grid. And then there was one instance during the night where Cara and I were inside that casemate. And I said, did you see what we left you? And we got a very clear male voice saying, yes, thank you, which was kind of interesting.
Ooh,
and
nice.
So to use those type of trigger items was, one of the other things that we did that night was we left, we have walkie-talkies. So we had 6 of them. So we left the walkie-talkies in different buildings. And then we stood in the middle of the fort and turned on the walkies and played a drum cadence that you would hear during the Revolutionary War. And when we did that, all of the voice recorders in those areas captured something. We captured a man's voice in one location. We captured a female's voice in another location. So that was a very interesting trigger item. And then coincidentally, across the river there was some type of a celebration where they let off large fireworks. And so you could hear them booming across the water. And it really sounded like gun bombardment, right? That's what the fort would have heard during the Revolutionary War. And so after that happened, the night was really, for us, active because we were capturing voices, we were seeing shadow figures, all types of stuff. So the trigger items are really important to what we do as well.
Yeah, it's got to be straight away, because it's like, I get you completely on about there. It's like, because I'm a poet by nature, and a poet's got to have like a line, you've got to lead, something's got to lead you into it. And when you're doing these entities, if that's the right word for it, you're trying to give them that same sort of trigger. It's like, it's like a bait almost. Completely fascinating stuff. Mm-hmm. Now, I want to change tax anyway, because obviously, people going to your really excellent website. You do have on your website an awful lot of your case studies as well on the videos. Now, was the full investigation side of it, were these videos always planned to be like this from the beginning, or did this come a bit later on?
Honestly, they came later on. So when we first started this, it was really something to do with my sisters that was different and unique. And I really had no plans to release any videos about it. It was just something that, like I said, we would get together and a unique girls trip, right? A unique girls weekend. But then my family, and we're kind of spread out all over the world, my family started asking, well, what's it like? What's the history of the building? What did you experience when you were there? And so honestly, the very first video that I put together was the Fort Mifflin video. Even though we had done other investigations before that, Fort Mifflin was the first video. And that's why, if you look at it now, it looks like it was made in my basement. But it was really to send to my family to say, here, this is what it was like. This is what we captured. And so one of my cousins was like, you need to put this on YouTube. And so I did. And honestly, it just really kind of exploded. I had no idea that we would get fans or followers, or that people would, want our autograph or our merchandise. It was really something that I had no concept of, to tell you the truth. This is not what it was meant to be, but it did morph into this entity that, to me, is really consuming my life, and I love it. It's allowed me to meet interesting people. It's allowed me to go to interesting places, and I get to do that with my best friends, who are my sisters. And
Brilliant.
that to me is really what this is all about.
Great. Now I can understand completely with you there. Now, obviously, I want to talk about, obviously, to date, the most recent case you've put up as well. So I was watching that one this morning. I really enjoyed it as well. I'm trying to go, I might get this pronunciation completely out, which is typical knowing me. Is it Post-Town Elementary School, or I got that pronunciation wrong?
Nope, you got it. Post-Town Elementary.
All right, it's fair enough. I wasn't sure then. So that's what I thought, because I was looking at it and I thought, is that a, how do you, that perks me dyslexic, honestly, I might get it wrong. Now, obviously, tell us about that case, and obviously, and what led you to want to go and look at this case in, because obviously, like, you must get absolutely loads of requests to come along and investigate things. What would draw you normally to your ideal case?
Well, again, the history is really what draws us. If it has a fascinating history or an interesting legend or lore, that is what is just the cream of the crop for us, those interesting stories. And Post-Town, there was a couple factors that led us to investigate this one. One, inside the paranormal community, it was really mentioned as a place that investigators should check out because it has such a haunted reputation. And then really, it was about logistics. I wanted to do an investigation with my coworker, my business partner, Miranda Young, as well as another individual in the paranormal community, Sarah Jane, from Paranormally Blonde. So we wanted to do a collaboration, and this location was equidistant from all of us. So that made it, kind of easy to do. And again, just a historical aspect, because you've got this really interesting elementary school that, had this grand, really historical narrative, but it also had behind the scenes a really tragic one as well, because it sits right next to a train track. And throughout its history, there's been several train crashes there, and they use that building or that area as triage. So you have a lot of death there. There were floods that really impacted the area. So the building was used for, again, housing those victims. So a really interesting historical perspective just from the building itself. And so when we went in, again, there was 4 of us on this investigation. So it was myself, my twin sister, Miranda from Ghost Biker Explorations, and Sarah Jane from Paranormally Blonde. And again, it was a collaboration investigation, but it was a very unique investigation because we were capturing things that really were unexplainable. So for example, as I said before, we set up night vision video cameras and stationary voice recorders throughout the building. And so because we want eyes and ears on every portion of the building that we can. So even if we're not in a room, we have a video and audio recorder going. And so there's one room that they've it's a former elementary or a younger grade, like first and second grade room. And so they have a lot of dolls in this room. So people just, when they come, they just leave dolls. And so there's 1,000 dolls in this room. It's kind of creepy. But so we had a
kind of is a word I
use. Yeah. I'm not a big doll fan, like
no.
in mass. So it was a little eerie, but so we had a voice recorder in there, and it's probably about, 40, 50 feet from the stairwell. So the stairwell is in the middle of the building. And if you look at a picture, the building goes out to the sideways from this middle stairwell. So we're climbing up the stairwell, and you know where we are. And at that same moment, as we're climbing up the stairs, the voice recorder in that room captured a female's voice saying, "Who'd she come with?" And it's really, it's a very clear, what we call EVP, electronic voice phenomena. It's a very clear disembodied voice. You see all 4 of us, so you know where we are. And so at that exact time, when you've got this voice being heard here on this voice recorder, I can't explain that. Again, that's one of those things that to me is unexplainable. Another thing that we do when we go to these investigations, we all wear body cameras. And so that allows me to get a timestamp of where everybody is in the building. And so if we capture something like that, I can cross-reference it with everybody and say, okay, this light was maybe caused by this flashlight, one of us painting the beams or whatever. But on this instance, I know exactly where everybody is. We're on the stairwell. And at that exact same point, we've got this voice being recorded over here. So again, that leads me to believe unexplainable, i.e. paranormal.
Oh, completely with that. Indeed. Chilling is a word I'd use as well. Now, I want to start wrapping up now anyway, because a couple of things I want to conclude with today, because I don't want to keep you here forever, because I know people would know you've got your day job starting up reasonably soon, so I want to give you a chance to get prepared for that. But I know obviously you've been hinting at on your website that you're looking at doing a book at the moment. Is that something that you're still in negotiation at the moment, is the best way of putting it?
It is, the book in my mind, well, part of it's in my mind, but it's just right now, just loose notebook paper of chapters and stuff that I really just need to sit down and put together and get it published. It's just one of those things that you kind of sit down and do it and 5 other projects pop up. So for example,
story my life,
yeah,
life,
right.
Well.
Yeah. So, for the past year, I've actually been working with my business partner, Miranda Young from Ghost Biker Explorations. She's another paranormal investigator. So we collaborated on what we call our day jobs. About a year ago, we opened a historic jail in Tennessee. We also use it as a paranormal research center. So I'm sitting in the jail right now. It's a very haunted jail. It was built in 1904. It was in operation as a jail until 2008. And so that's really been, the points in our life right now that's taking up the most time is really kind of getting this jail and the museum and the paranormal research center really up and running and doing some different things here. So, the book, it's one of those things, it's one of the projects that I really want to get done, but it's one of those that has the tendency to get pushed back and back and back as more things come to the forefront.
Still my life as well. I can relate to that. Yeah.
Yeah. Most people can, I think.
Oh yeah. I'm always a firm believer in this. I always tell myself I do one project at once, Andrew. Never happens. And I bet you're the same as well. Never happens. It's always the case that, honestly, in my case, when I started off, I was a poet back in 2010, really, professionally. And the podcasting took over 6 years later by chance. Just like your life just goes in unexpected directions. I'm always a believer in that. And this is what's clear has happened to yourself as well. I can see that. Now, obviously, what other plans do you have going forward? And is there any more investigations lined up for the moment or that you can talk about?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, we're dropping an investigation tonight. That's from the USS North Carolina. Jenny and I conducted this investigation a couple of months ago. So I've finally been able to go through all of the evidence, put together and produce the video. So that will air tonight. I'm very excited about that. And then another video from the Madison Seminary that Jenny and I investigated in August. That will be up hopefully in the next month. And then we've got an investigation early next year at a hospital in West Virginia, and really just doing some more investigations here at the jail. So a lot of different things are in the works for Soul Sisters Paranormal. Absolutely.
Brilliant. So good luck with it. Now, we were talking off before we start recording as well to wrap up with, obviously, your investigations to date have all been in America, but I know you would like it to go to international maybe someday in the future, wouldn't you? Because I know you have been to England, obviously not investigation wise, but would that be something, could you see yourselves actually doing it in international in the future maybe?
Oh, yeah, I would love to. America has a great history and I love American history, but we just obviously don't have the longevity that someplace like England does, or Europe, or in some cases, Australia, which is another location that I'd like to get to. But to go to London, again, I've visited numerous times and walk into these historic locations and, walk on the path of people who are buried there from the 1500s, 1600s. That to me is just absolutely fascinating. And I just love the everything history about your country. So I would love to get over there, investigate some of the castles, investigate some of the pubs over there. Definitely.
If you have make it to England, I'll take you to one. I know one.
Perfect
in area called Bolton, and I'm not going to name the pub. And I've seen a ghost walk. I think that's the third ghost story I've not told you about, where I've seen I think it was a Tudor lord walk through the walls, and I thought, oh my God.
Yeah, I would love to get over there.
Oh, incredible.
And yeah, there are several paranormal investigations. And one of the cool things about the paranormal community is you get to meet interesting people from all over the world. And so there are teams over there that I would love to collaborate with and do some different investigations as well. And like I said, Australia is another location that I'd love to get to. There's several reported very haunted locations down there. And yeah, so internationally, it would be my dream come true for sure.
Oh, good luck with it, definitely. Is there any sort of, if you could, I'm going to have to ask you, Jenny, to wrap up with, if you had a chance, would there be any sort of dream investigation you'd like to do?
Honestly, Leap Castle in Ireland.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that. I've heard of that, yeah.
Yeah, that would be my dream location. And there are numerous places here in the U.S. The Queen Mary, which is a ship out in California. I'd love to get to that one. But really just these locations that, again, have this really unique history or legend or lore that we can show people that this happened, right? This is why this is important. And they may not know about. For example, real quick, one of the locations that we've done is the Ma Barker house in Central Florida. We were the first team to investigate that house. And sorry, I've got a cat here. One of the, and so the Ma Barker house was interesting because not a lot of people knew about this. It happened, the event happened in 1935. It was a shootout between Ma and Fred Barker and some members of the FBI. And really after the shootout, the house just became forgotten, even though this was really where the gangster era of the 1920s, 1930s ended with this shootout. And so we were able to investigate that house. And when we put our video out, I had so many people tell us, I never knew that history. There were people that lived right down the road that said, I never knew the history. I didn't know this was here. I didn't realize that this is what happened in 1935. And so to be able to bring that history to the forefront and show our audience that this is why this is important, right? This has a very unique place in our historical narrative. To be able to do that is really what we do. And so that's what we love. And so finding these locations like that have that history, that legend, that lore, to us is just fascinating.
Brilliant. Well, good luck with it, definitely. Now, if people want to find out more, obviously, about Soul Sisters, where do you recommend they go?
Well, our website is www.soulsistersparanormal.com. Anything you want to know about us is there. All of our videos are there. Our spinoff series called Landmarks, Legends, and Lore.
Sorry,
that's
I
on there.
knew I'd forgotten to ask you something. Yeah, my apologies, but forgetful here. Tell us about the spinoff series. Sorry, I have watched that as well. I really enjoyed that. Sorry, my fault. I completely forgot. Tell us about where that came from then. Sorry, apologies.
No, it's okay. Well, what we love to do is research legends and lore. And so that series, Landmarks, Legends, and Lore, is really one of these videos where we highlight different stories that we really don't do an investigation at or around. So for example, we did haunting aviation crashes. And so we looked at several airline crashes and their historical claims, but also their paranormal claims. For example, there was a crash in Chicago and that crash site is reported to be haunted. And so we tell really the story of those places and why they're reported to be haunted. So we don't necessarily do an investigation, but we really highlight those locations. So we've got haunted cemeteries, we've got haunted bridges, again, haunted aviation. And so that's really, again, what we like to do, because not many people have heard of these places or really have heard of these events. And so it's just a different way for us to highlight these historical places and events that we don't do on investigations.
Yeah, it does look a great series. I knew obviously the Legend of Sleepy Hollow. I knew about Gettysburg as well, but certainly I hadn't heard of some of the haunted ceremonies, the bridges ones you were referring to as well. So it's a really excellent series. So good luck with it. So right, we'll wrap up here. So I do apologize. I knew I'd forgotten so much.
No worries. So again, that's on our. It's all right. No worries. It's on our website, www.soulsistersparanormal.com. We're also very active on Facebook under Soul Sisters Paranormal. And then we have our YouTube channel, which is Soul Sisters Paranormal.
Brilliant. Well, thanks again for that, Kristy, today. It's been a pleasure. Now, that's Andy N wrapping up today from Spoken Maple. As Don Callis, former of Impact Wrestling, says, stay safe and stay over. And we will see you all next time.